Some other people might share that same thought as I do, but that's just my thought. It's not that that is fact. And that, to me, as we start to realize that there's so much more thought going on, and we can allow people to have their own thoughts, and we have our own thoughts, and we don't have to take them on if we don't want to. And that is part of creating that intentional model. And it's coming from a clean place. So when I mean clean, I mean in the sense of that, one of the things for me is that I think that I had struggled with for so long was really feeling that it was the person I was around or the people I was around that were the problem, and that they were just not a very good person. They weren't a nice person. They did things that were rude or mean. And in some cases, maybe it was, maybe even in a court of law, I could describe some of somebody's characteristics and they could say, oh yeah, that's a bad person. But even the thought that we have that that's a bad person does come down to that person's perspective, because somebody else might know the same person and then be like, oh, I thought that person was very helpful for me. That person was, always treated me nice. That person smiled at me. And there is part of us, because the more I realize and dive into that we are 50-50, 50 good, 50 bad, that everybody has that quality. And the more that I don't try to fight it and try to justify myself in saying that, well, it's them, that's the problem, it's not me, the less that I kind of detach from that enough that I start to really see my own thought process. I realize that the power is in my thinking. It truly is. Like, it is on how I'm perceiving that person, whatever they say, whatever they do, however they respond, however they react. It is completely on me, on my response to it. And when I take that massive ownership of it, it is very empowering and can really help you in not feeling like you're fighting something all the time or you're avoiding it. Because I was really good at avoiding interaction with people, believing that my thoughts about them, that other people felt that way too. In fact, I had friends that told me that they did, that they saw that person that way as well. They're like, oh yeah, that person is just, and I, people told me that that's how they see them. And yes, they're that way. And I truly believed it. Like, if I told you about that person, I was telling you the news. Like, that's exactly that person. And I was so connected to that. That's the way that person was, that I continually saw that person that way. And then I didn't like how I felt when I was around that person. And when you start to dive into your model work and realizing that the thoughts we're having is creating the emotion we're experiencing, but we really need to own that thought. And even when I had the thought about the person, it's exploring that, and that's that sitting in awareness spot where you kind of go, what is the good about this person? And I'm not saying about like find all the good things about them and, and try to outweigh the bad things and those types of things. Because when we kind of do that, it's kind of like a falsehood. Again, it's just another thought we're having. It's not actually what we think. We're just having another thought about it. And so I even want you to go a little deeper, or I even like to go deeper with my clients to get real clear and kind of real deep about that, so that they can start to take this massive ownership of their own thinking in a way that they don't have to look at the bad and good of that person. They just see them, that's a person. They don't even like go beyond, and it's going beyond that in the sense that you're not labeling them one way or the other, and realizing every label you give them is every thought you have. It's all a thought. It's all a thought. It's all the way that you are choosing to think that. Whether it's your upbringing, whether it's the books you're reading, whether it's the TV you're watching, whether it's the radio you're listening to, all these thoughts are being interlaid into us. And so when we can step back and get really clear on how we want to perceive it, because how we want to perceive it is how we want to feel it. Because that feeling, that when I look at my husband, for example, and I think, oh, I just love him, I feel that love. He does not. Every time I say that to myself, and if I'm just sitting there on the couch, right, and I see him, and I'm like, he's so crazy. He's all mine. Like, I just love him. When I'm thinking that, he's not feeling anything. He's not feeling love. He might even feel like, why are you staring at me? Like, why are you looking at me? What did I do? And all I'm doing is the thoughts that I'm bringing in are for me, and for the ownership that I'm having of them is so powerful that I want to own them, and to a point that it's just becomes how I am. Again, it's that being, becoming part of that being. When you sit in awareness and you understand, when you're in creation mode, you're just being. You don't have to believe you need to have or get to do and then become, right? You just get to sit in that being presence. And it's not that I look at him and think, well, these are all the nice things he did, but he didn't do the dishes, he didn't do this, he didn't do, like, I don't go through this list of stuff of what he did and did not do. Instead, I realize that that thought that I'm having is creating an emotion that I want. It's not the he did or didn't do list, right? We get this big list of things and we think, well, this person did this and this person did that and they did, this is what they did. And then we mark off and go, well, okay, they've done more good than bad, so I guess I'll keep them around because they're better. But we can choose to look at it in a way that we can choose things in a way that this is how we truly want to perceive it, regardless of any outside influence, even regardless of what they do or don't do. This is what we're choosing. One of the things that I've always find very fascinating is the word love. Is love. There are so many songs out there about love hurts, love is painful, love is confusing, love is this. And I want to offer you this, is love is none of those things. Love is love. How you think about it is what is creating whether love or not love in your life. If you think love is crazy, you're having a thought and you're feeling crazy. You're not thinking that love isn't the emotion that you're experiencing. But if you want to experience love, you can have a thought that experiences love. When somebody passes away, when somebody dies, you can hold love and pain in the same exact sphere, realizing that love is coming from these thoughts and pain is coming from these thoughts. Love isn't painful. The thought I have that they're gone is my pain. The fact that I loved them and they're gone is that combination, right? But at the same time, that the fact that I'm thinking of them being gone is creating the pain. The love I have for them is the memory, and that memory is love. So love and pain, we kind of start to mix them instead of realizing that we can hold space for both of them. I've experienced in my life where I've had those opportunities where I've had absolutely love and bliss, and at the same time it was heart-wrenching and agony. And I think many of us can understand that, and we can relate to that. And when we can get clear on it and we can hold that space for both emotions, realizing there's a thought that we're having that's creating that gut-wrenching pain, and the memory we have that can't be taken away that creates absolute love. So when we are starting to create intentional models, creating the intentional model does not mean we give up that, right? We don't give up the prove energy. It doesn't go away. And prove is not bad. Prove is good. Like, prove can give you some really great stuff. Like, it's trying to save your life. It's trying to help you. And this is good stuff. We don't want to get rid of it. We want it to be our motherboard. I would never want to get rid of that. And when I expand for it and I make more room for it and I realize, no, this is part of the deal and this is part of my safety and my security, and to make sure that I can still stay alive. And then I can have the thoughts of love, of just pure bliss. I can have those thoughts and knowing that this is still going to be around. So when you create an intentional model, it does not diminish or get rid of our unintentional. Like I said, we're just creating more roots to this, and we're holding space for all of it instead of fighting it and thinking that we have to do better than it. Like we have to somehow outrun it or outprove it or out strategize it, right? Instead of doing that, we just hold space for it when we create that awareness. So I am going to give an example of creating an intentional model. I want to talk a little bit about relationships. And so I did a model of one that was an older model that I had before. And now there's a newer model I have now on it, but I just kind of was exploring it a little bit and realizing that maybe I could even advance it more. Maybe I could even make more out of it and start to believe things in a way that even resonate with me more, so I show up even better in this relationship. And so my model, my original model I had, was about one of my sons, and he is not the best of communicators. He's older now, he's 23, and he's doing his thing, but he's not a really great communicator when it comes to me, and even when it comes to my husband. Sometimes I think he communicates better with friends, but not so much with us. And so at the beginning, when I would try to message him or text him, this was my circumstance, my son's communication. So that's my circumstance, like my son and the communication I'm having with my son. So it's neutral. There's nothing like good or bad there. So my thought before in the past was, he doesn't message me back. Like I message him and he doesn't message me back. When I had that thought, I would feel very distant. Like I wasn't connecting. I felt distant. And I felt sad too in there, but I felt mostly distant. Like I just want to connect with you. I just want to be part of you. And when I was feeling that way, I didn't send messages as much. When I did start sending message, I would oversend, like I was kind of compensating because I didn't send before. And then I sometimes would get resentful because I would send all this stuff and then he wouldn't send anything for a long time, a message back. And then there's sometimes I just totally don't reach out. Like even if he called, I would avoid his phone call. And so those were kind of the behaviors, those actions that I was showing up because of the thought I was having is he doesn't message me back. I was mad. I was mad, but I was feeling just like disconnected, like I couldn't connect with him. So I was feeling very distant. And the result from all those actions and that thought that I'm having is I don't communicate with him. So it's kind of funny. Usually our thought, one of the things that maybe I hadn't mentioned in the thought and the result line is usually they're connected in some way because our thoughts do create our results. And in this situation, my thought was he doesn't communicate with me. My results can't be the other person or my thoughts. My thoughts can be about the other person. My results aren't going to be the other person. My results are my ownership. I got to take ownership of that. And so that means that I can't put in my results that he doesn't message me. Like that can't be my result because my result, that's me taking responsibility for how I'm showing up and what I can do about the situation. So when I have the thought, he doesn't message me back, the result after all my actions and my emotions I'm experiencing is I don't communicate with him because if I really look in my actions, when I do communicate, it's overly too much. And then I decide that I don't want to communicate because I get resentful. Like that's that whole back and forth. So the problem is I'm not communicating. He's just doing him. He's being him. He's responding or not responding. It's not my job to psychoanalyze him or figure out exactly why he's doing that to me or what did I do as a parent that he's doing that, right? Because that's not going to serve me at all. And that's not going to serve him. But mostly it's not going to serve me. So when I realized is that I'm not communicating with him, I put on some new thoughts. What other thoughts could I have? So here's a list of thoughts that I had. And this is what I recommend is when you're creating an intentional model, put on a few different thoughts, just like trying on clothes, right? You try on a set of clothes, you're like, that feels okay. It doesn't quite fit me as well as I want it to, so I'll try something else on. Have you ever put on clothes and you're like, oh, this fits me like a glove? That's what you're looking for in that thought. Like that thought feeds energy into me and it fits me like a glove. And so you got to try on, sometimes you got to try on a few different clothing before you get to the one you like. And that's the same thing with thoughts. Sometimes you got to try on some thoughts. You got to give yourself some examples of thoughts that you could be thinking until you find the one that kind of matches, that kind of fits in. And so when you're creating that intentional model, and this again is after we've kind of sat in awareness, we figured out what was going on, and we're like, okay, I'm ready to move forward with this in a way that isn't graspy or pulley or anything like that. It's just a way that like I'm going to be in my being, and this is my thought about it, and it resonates with me. So that type of energy. All right, so some of the thoughts that I put on is he talks to me when he's ready. It's a thought I could have, like he talks to me when he's ready. So about my son's communication, he'll talk to me when he's ready. I appreciate connecting with him. I could have that thought, like I appreciate connecting with him. It's not like I appreciate connecting with him when he decides to connect with me. Like we can always have those little but ifs, like I love my husband, I love my son, but he doesn't communicate with me. So we always kind of that, I love the same, let's reverse that but, like my son doesn't communicate with me very well, but I love him. Right? You kind of end on that note so it kind of resonates with you in a different way. You want to work on changing that to something that makes that you taking ownership of it and not putting it out on him that it's his situation. So I appreciate connecting with him. That's on me. I appreciate that when I get to connect with him. He's a quiet soul. That was another thought that I had. Like he's kind of a quiet kid. Like he only has usually a couple of friends that he hangs out with. He's kind of a loner in that. And although he has lots of people that enjoy being around him. So, I'm like, well, he's kind of a quiet soul. And then that kind of made me feel like, well, I don't know if I want to, believe that when it comes to the communication part. So I'm like, oh, I could put that somewhere else, maybe another different thought that I'm having about my son for something else. So another circumstance with my son, not his communication, maybe there's something else. So I could hold that for something else possibly. I hear from him when he's ready. So again, I could have the thought like, I hear from him when he's ready. Like when he's ready to talk, he'll talk to me. I liked the thought, I appreciate communicating with him. So for me, that took all ownership onto me. That's one reason I liked it, because then that took full responsibility in me and my thoughts. And my son's communication, and I believe I appreciate connecting with him. And when I think of that way, I think that I am connecting with him. I feel like I'm connected with him. So my emotion is connection. And when I have connection with him, I reach out to him. I send him letters. I send him packages when I can. I enjoy talking to him. When he does message me back, I get back to him as soon as I can. Like I open that up for him and I don't pile all this stuff onto him. And because I do that, my result is I connect with my son. And he didn't have to change a thing. He didn't have to change any way that he was communicating with me, whatever he was doing. And when I hold him that space, because I believe those thoughts, it's kind of funny. He starts to reach out to me more. He sees that I'm not going to overpower him, which I was really good at doing sometimes. And I'm like, so what are you doing? Where are you going? What's going on? What's happening? He's like, I really don't want to talk about this. But just getting in there. And so finding that, well, I love connecting with him. And then I just give him space to be him. And it doesn't mean that it's always right. Giving space means that he gets to have thoughts and he gets to have emotions and he gets to have actions that he takes and he says things to me or he does whatever he does. And then I get to choose my response. I get to choose how I perceived it. And that is always up to me. And when we start to do it where it's not a list, like, well, if you do these things or if you do these things, I'm going to love you more if you do this or if you do that. When it comes to relationship, I love books on relationship. I've read plenty of books on relationships and I love that. And I find that there's different little pieces that I gain from each one. And one of the things is that one of the books that I enjoyed reading a while ago, and I've read it, recently as well, is The Five Love Languages. And what I have found with things like that type of counseling that I think about when I think about marriage type counseling, because I've been to kind of that traditional marriage type counseling, is that it is the list. It is, what does your wife want? You should be doing, you should meeting your wife's needs. And I kind of come from a different point of view, because my growth in my relationship happened because I decided to meet my own needs. I decided to figure out what's my love language that I need to be talking to myself on. And if I want to figure out my husband's love language, then that's up to me to do it. And then I choose to do it based on not that he needs that from me, but because I want to give him that. When we get to that point where it's like, well, you're not doing enough for me, or I'm not doing enough, like when there's that competition in there, we miss the connection in relationships. And to me, that's so sad to see. I feel like we miss it in connections with our kids. We miss it in connections with our parents, with our loved ones, whatever it is, with our friends, because we're trying so hard we're not purposely trying to change them or trying to like make them see my point of view. But we're doing that because we want to be heard. We want to be listened to. And the more that we want to be heard and listened to, the more we need to stop and listen to ourselves. Because that's you speaking to you. Because you're feeling an emotion because you need to feel it. That other person doesn't need to feel it. If you feel sad because your husband didn't come home and bring you flowers when you thought he was going to, you need to work on, why do you feel sad about that? What's going on for you? And it's fascinating, because what's interesting is that we look at that as saying, well, that's selfish. Well, that's selfish thinking. And I really do believe that to me is true charity. Because when I take care of my needs, I come to you with a full cup. When I give my husband's flower, when I make my husband a dinner, it's not because he asked me to, it's because I already had a full cup and I was ready to give it to him. And when we start to do that, and we stop take away the list, take away what they're doing right or wrong, and we start to decide, well, how is it we want to see them, regardless of what they do, then we start to have thoughts, and we start to put on that dress or that shirt or that blouse, whatever it is, those pants that fit us like a glove, and we're like, that makes sense. That is me radiating to being, like I am being right there. That's me. There's not an expectation. There's not something that I'm looking forward to, or like looking for them to give to me. Because when they give me, like when my husband comes and brings me flowers, when he does those things for me, when I come home and the dishes are done, I authentically, truly appreciate and love it. I didn't ask him for it. I wasn't requesting it of him. I didn't demand it out of him. He did it because I have my cup full and he just wants to keep on filling it up. And it's funny because then I just want to keep on filling his cup up. So it really works that way. And I feel like that was one thing out of all the things that I have kind of learned, is that the more we meet our own needs and wants, the easier it is for somebody else to meet our needs and wants. Because half the time, I mean, come on, half the time, I don't even know what I need or want. I just think that what that was is what I wanted. I think that, well, I wanted him to bring me flowers. And then you ask, well, why did you want him to? Well, because that means he loves me. Well, made you think that he doesn't love you? Like, what before made you believe he didn't love you before the flowers showed up? Like, he probably loves you regardless if he brought you flowers or not. But now we're making that mean something, and now we're adding into it, and we're deciding that that means more than it needs to mean. And, when we make space for people to be them, we can create intentional models that have gusto to them, that have meaning, that kind of resonate real deep in, and then start creating the things that we want.